But I've noticed that we've been joined by Suresh Prabhuji, who is somebody I have heard speak many times, and who I respect very much indeed, and he will be joining us.
I'm a big fan of Mr. Suresh Prabhu. I always have been. There are not many like him with a mind like his, and his simplicity. The problem is he's so reclusive that one can't get to him. You know, he's one of the nicest ministers or people that could have happened to India, and I really do believe that I miss him greatly. And I have to say that he's a real inspiration. I'm a big fan, you know.
Well, Ritu, we finally got to him. We found him.
You're very lucky. You're very lucky.
What do you want to ask him?
No, I have nothing to ask him. I only want to tell him that he's missed, and it was so nice to have him in the ministry with us. He was a great support. He gave us such a push, and he is a man of few words, but he's somebody who sticks by his word. So I'm totally a fan, and I remain that. Yeah.
Thank you, Ritu.
But may I ask you, sir? Can I just have a one-liner before you go into your main topic with everybody? What's your take now on the new education policy? How do you feel about it?
You know, actually, you have to look at this policy in the context of what kind of a society you like to build. And in fact, it is actually important that education will play a very key role in building new societies. And education in itself has such a different connotation. So far we had a education which was churning out degree holders, certificate holders. But this time we are focusing on making people not just holding degrees, but holding probably on their own. They will be able to stand on their own. That's what we actually broadly call this Atmanirbhar Bharat concept. If you can actually create a person who has all the degrees in the world, but no job. He has all the knowledge in the world acquired through education, but cannot be applied to real world. So there is so much of disconnect. Hopefully, I wish that this policy, once implemented, will bridge this gap in a substantial way. We'll be having both degrees in hand, but also a person who will be able to say that I earned something, not just a degree, but I can earn my livelihood out of the education that I actually followed. I think that's very important part of that. Also, you know, then we are trying to focus on this policy. I hope so, on individualistic priorities and needs. For example, Ritu, she's a great fashion designer, undoubtedly, but she's also a dog lover. She's somebody who has. So now, you know, can somebody say, can you be both at the same time? She can be not only both, she can be even 10 different faculties at the same time. So if she wants to pursue more than one specific interest through education, today's policy didn't allow that. So you cannot study music and engineering at the same time. You cannot do medicine and can also do architecture at the same time. Now, I'm not saying it is possible under the new policy, but I hope we provide such kind of opportunities to people to pursue their inherent knowledge and interest, not knowledge, but interest, and take it through a route of knowledge, pursue that interest. I think that is something also hopefully should be the part of the policy.
I mean, that's a wonderful point, sir. And the point as well that, you know, that if we go back to Nalanda and those great liberal arts universities that have nobody's ever been able to replicate the genius of those. That's inherent in the beautiful Indian DNA. And it is a beautiful DNA. This is where I take my leave. Thank you very much for joining us for that. And Ritu, thanks. Absolutely lovely seeing you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you, and great seeing you, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. You look well, and it's lovely.
Bless you. Thank you. Thank you, Ritu. And I will now pass you to.
Thank you, Mike. I'll take care from them. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ritu, for joining us. And Mike, thank you so much for making my job much easier and getting Suresh Prabhuji straight talking from his heart. Thank you so much, Mike.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. No, I know your name any introduction, but still, as a duty, I would like to introduce to a larger audience. Sri Suresh Prabhuji is a man of action, having a penchant for undertaking reforms, scripting turnarounds, and achieving superlative results by working in a mission mode. He currently serves the Rajya Sabha as Member of Parliament and India Sherpa to G20 Summit. He also previously been the Minister of Commerce, Industry, Railways, Civil Aviation, among other very important portfolios. Constantly featured in the list of top 5 ministers in India from 2014 to 17 in terms of both performance and accessibility in nationwide surveys, he has always been an advocate for decisive and growth-driven change. Under his leadership, railways transformed from a slow-moving behemoth into a fast, responsive organization. He is also the man behind introducing the agriculture export policy, setting up the investment war room, and implementation plan for Make in India 2.0, and setting up a data analytic unit. With these words, I present to you none other than Shri Suresh Prabhuji. Sir, namaskar. And apart from this, we all must know that he's also the founding chancellor of Rishihood University. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation to join us and talk to us about about topic called Atmanirbhar Bharat. I know it was such a fascinating thing to hear your wisdom about national education policy. I wish we can get some more time and talk to you exclusively about education sector. I'm sure we will get in the past. Coming back to today's topic for this summit, Sureshji, I would like to straight away ask you and take you a point where all of us are actually thinking about when we see today's economical world, which is so interlinked. We heard Guru Murthy ji yesterday, Mohandas Pai ji yesterday, who were talking about the time has come where India is in center and all globe is actually supplying services to us. Where do you see, how do we practice as an Indian Atmanirbharta when we see the whole interlinked global economy?
That's a very good point, and in fact, thank you for triggering a new idea into and the new direction into this entire discourse of Atmanirbhar Bharat. If you permit me, I'll just take a few minutes and put it all together.
Please, sir.
One, you cannot have Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India, unless you have Atmanirbhar Bharatiyas. So you cannot have an individual who is not as strong as the country is. You cannot have a stronger country when weaker citizens. And therefore, Atmanirbhar Bharat, in my opinion, encompasses the idea of making each individual self-reliant. Now, the question that you're asking me is a very valid question. I will try to put it into it if time permits. The point is, in the global economy, as you correctly pointed out, you cannot grow exponentially and can achieve higher rates of growth if you're not interconnected to the world. There is an empirical evidence. The so-called Asian tigers, the East Asian economies, rather the Southeast Asian economies, the ASEAN, registered some phenomenal growth rates because they benefited from, firstly, their location, because they were in the same vicinity as that of the fastest growing economies at that time. Japan became the second largest economy, now relegated to the third thanks to the rise of China. But Japan and then later on Korea, when they were growing, they actually, Southeast Asian economies could piggyback on that and grow fast. Now, if you really look at the model of that, what was the model? Well, let us go a little bit ahead, if you want, a little earlier into the times. Europe, at least few countries in Europe, UK at that time was the strongest economy. In fact, we always forget it. The sterling pound was a reserve currency of the world. Sterling pound was a reserve currency of the world. And today, the economy which is suffering the most after pandemic is UK, among the large economies. Spain and UK are the largest sufferers of the economy. They lost GDP, which is not comparable to any other economy of the world. But so going back into the times, UK was the largest, very strong economy. How did they grow? How did they become so strong? So the model was colonization. They colonized the whole world. Of course, they had an instrument while they were colonizing. The industrial evolution had just happened, and industrial evolution provided them the ability to actually go for mass production. They could go in for making the new source of energy and the new engines that they could grow as a result of that, and they grew fast. Then came United States, particularly as the decline of Europe was happening. The US became a much larger economy and now became the largest economy. What did US did actually? They used to manufacture virtually everything they wanted to manufacture, and Made in USA was a great label. In fact, some of our very ingenious people in India also used to say Made in USA, and that was made in Ulhasnagar Sindhi Association. So that was called Made in USA. So they said Ulhasnagar Sindhi Association was a USA brand. So this is the ingenious mind of India. But USA, Made in USA was a big brand because they were making everything. While the Japan and Korea realized that they could grow, first Japan of course, then Korea, they realized if they want to grow, the domestic market is not enough for them to grow. So what they did? So they said, we'll look at global market as our target area. So we'll make cars, not just for Japan, we'll make cars for USA. Incidentally, USA is the biggest market of automobiles because there are more highways than the rail network. And that's how they designed their entire transport system. And they're locked into that today. And that's one of the reasons why US emissions are also very high because of vehicular pollution. But point, I'm not taking about pollution, which is my other interest of climate change, but I'm not going into that. I'm just saying the model, because you asked me this question, I'm just thinking aloud. So the model was that we make everything, but then the emergence of Japan and Korea, and particularly Japan, they said, why not I export everywhere? Why should I make everything in my own country? If I have Honda as a brand, the brand can sell, but not necessarily I have to make each and every component of Honda in my country. I can make it anywhere else, which makes me sense commercially, so that when my end product is sold in USA or Europe, I can compete with the domestic manufacturer already manufacturing that in that country. There was the GM, General Motors, which are already manufacturing large number of vehicles. So I would compete. And if you remember the hub of manufacturing of automobiles in Michigan, that area. So they said, we'll focus on making my product as competitive as possible while holding the intellectual property rights of that particular product in my own hands, and I will sell it anywhere in the world. That created what you today call as global value chain and global supply chains. The value was held by them, and even if you look at some of the US companies, for example, Apple phone, I'm sure is in your pocket. If not two, at least one for sure. Left and right pocket, you may have two also. But what is where do you make which? So anyway, if you want Apple, we'll definitely say Apple is an American company, right? But where do they manufacture? Do they manufacture anything in the USA? Or you say Nike, the shoes you are wearing, I'm sure you go out for workout, you'll wear Nike. So you'll say Nike, which company? US company. What do they make in USA? Almost nothing. So what is happened to the US, which was a manufacturing hub of the world, and today they realize that they are making value of it, of manufacturing somewhere else, holding intellectual property right, designing in my country, and making money out of it. In fact, some of the cash reserves of Apple will be more than 80% of global country GDP individually, not collectively, individually. So that's the power that they acquired. Same with Japan. In fact, there was a time when Japan was holding cash. The companies, the Japanese government is broke. They are more than 300% GDP to debt, public debt ratio. But Japanese companies holding cash, even today, maybe even more than 26% of the Japanese GDP. They are holding cash. So what is the result? That they have come out with the new model, which has helped the companies a great deal, and to an extent, even countries a great deal. Now, so that's the question that you're asking me. So this global value chain and global supply chains have emerged. Now, a country like India, which is the 5th largest economy, not small, touching $3 trillion in a touching distance. And I prepared a plan as Commerce Industry Minister for how India will look like when we become $5 trillion economy. And not just look like, it's not a mirror, but I was just saying what the strategies for that. So I prepared all that. I'm not getting into that today. But I'm just saying the question you asked me. So this is the world we are entering today. So Atmanirbhar Bharat has two key elements, making India Atmanirbhar. And as I said, to make India Atmanirbhar, making individuals Atmanirbhar. Now, India Atmanirbhar, we'll have to keep in mind this geopolitics and geoeconomics of the world. You must keep in mind the integrated global economies which has actually emerged even before we joined it. And in fact, we are also partly beneficiary of it. For example, India is now becoming more than, under the old GDP series, almost half of India's manufacturing was coming from only one sector. That's automobiles. Now, the new series, it is about 37 to 39% of GDP from manufacturing comes from only one sector, that is automobiles. How do you make automobiles in India? Because of auto components. So auto component is already part of global supply chain and global value chain. We are actually able to export auto components. Of course, we import some of them also, but we export auto components to all parts of the world. Other example of this supply chain is generic drugs. We are able to sell our formulation to whole world. Why? Because we are part of global value chain and global supply chain. So we are also beneficiaries of that. Now we would like our country to benefit more, and it should be at global level. So I'll just share with you. I have, in fact, I'm sorry you asked me a wrong question, so I'm giving a very elaborate answer. I think one day we'll have a special program on this.
Bearing from you.
Sorry? I will just.
It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure, sir.
Then I know. But I'm just saying, so what I did was, as a Commerce Industry Minister again, I set up a group 3 years ago under the chairmanship of Surjit Bhalla, who is now Prime Minister has appointed him as India's representative in International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. That time I was in India, so I caught hold of him, a good friend of mine, made him a chairman. And today's Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, was that time with the Tatas. So I made him a member. The former Commerce Secretary Raju Kher, I made him a member. Adil Zainulbhai, one of our finest intelligent person, who is the chairman of the Quality Control of India, Quality Council of India. I made him a chairman of that, a member of that. And we prepared a report as to how does India benefit from this realignment of global value chain and global supply chain. That is what we would like to do today. We should be part of that so that we can become Atmanirbhar. So this was a strategy which we prepared almost 3 years ago, and the report is ready and was under process. I hope that is getting implemented. At other level, at citizen level, we must make sure that growth reaches the people first before it is captured in the statistics of growth. And if you want the people to benefit first, then where the people live? They live not in national capital or state capital. They live in villages, in districts. So if we can make each and every district grow at a rate faster than what it is growing today, and I had said, just for the sake of saying, 3% minimum more than the natural growth, because if it's growing at 6%, 9%. If it's growing at 5%, 8%. If it's growing at 10% already, 13%. Just 3% more than the natural growth as an incremental growth by re-strategizing it. And I said, who will do this re-strategizing? First, we need baseline. How do you know that it is growing at 6% and 5%? As government, we can always tell you numbers which you may not believe. So I asked National Council for Applied Economic Research and Indian Institute of Management to prepare strategy. All 6 districts have been selected as a pilot, all ready. What's the advantage of that? The district will become Atmanirbhar. The citizen of the district will be the beneficiaries of that. And that's how we'll build a foundation for a much stronger India, which is Atmanirbhar India. Now, marrying both is very important. Macro, which is at national level, and micro, which is at district level or a village level. Both must go hand in hand. The opportunity that will be provided by India becoming integrated strategically into the global value chain will benefit our small businesses at ground level. Because small businesses doesn't have ability to strategize like this. That has to be done by the government. Now that brings us to an interesting point. Atmanirbharta is a necessity. But Atmanirbharta will also presupposes a very defined role for government as well as for citizens. In my opinion, we should not make people dependent on government. And I think that could be a counterproductive to realizing the true potential of the individual, his entrepreneurship, his hard work, his ability to do different things. And that's why I'm saying people like in India, we could think about made in USA, Ulhasnagar Sindhi Association. So this is also a thinking ability. So if you do not allow that to come to fore in full form, will not realize the true potential of that individual. And if individual is not realized full potential, societies will not be Atmanirbhar. So country eventually will not be. So to make that happen, individual to really benefit from all this, we must remove unwarranted restrictions, regulation which is counterproductive, and that's the role of the government. But there are certain things which individuals cannot do, only government can do, and that is infrastructure. So government must focus on creating infrastructure, which is a positive intervention, and remove negative intervention like undue regulations and doing something like this. I can tell you, and I'll share my personal experience with you. 25 years ago, I became member of Lok Sabha for the first time. I won 4 Lok Sabha elections consecutively from the same constituency. I decided that we'll make every person dependent on himself, not on the government. So we had trained 1 lakh people like that, women and others. And my wife is really leading it. She's a journalist, left a job and focusing on it without taking 1 rupee from that institution. And we have created a system wherein people can do it. Now to make this happen, therefore, we have to focus on people, give them training, make them realize their true potential, remove the hurdles, give them necessary input like credit, market access, very important. Providing market access is very important within the country and outside the country. Market access, remove restrictions on market access. I'm not saying you buy it for, you don't need it and you still buy it. Should not be the government doing it. Market access, what is sellable in market will happen, and that can go on. So small businesses need support. I have said many times when USA was saying in 2008 that banks are very important. They're too big to fail. When they came out with this new concept of too big to fail, when Lehman Brothers was almost about to collapse. So I had said at that time in the US that this is too big to fail, but small businesses are too small to succeed and too small to survive. Forget fail, they cannot even survive. So to make small businesses survive and succeed, the government must provide the necessary support in terms of policy, not necessarily in many other form, but policy greatly, and remove hurdles and provide market access. I think that can itself bring about a tremendous change. Another program that we are working on is called geographical indicators. Now, each and every district of India has a very unique characteristic. If you go to Moradabad, you'll find a brass fair. If you go to some of our northeast areas, you'll find some fantastic handicrafts. You cannot imagine how good they are. You come to my old constituency, Konkan, which I will invite you not today, but little later, when we are the Alfonso mangoes. The only best Alfonso mango, the only Alfonso mangoes are grown there, and that's why the geographical indicators are necessary. If you make the geographical indicator the reality, it is like intellectual property rights. So the farmers there, the artisans there will get better price for their produce. So I'll not be a copier sitting far away from Moradabad or where the brass fair is made and say, I have made it in Moradabad. That's a legitimate right of Moradabad artisans to get due out of their labor and their art. So even making Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have to bring in more of GI. We have to provide all this. So I think this is all a very good idea, but it needs strategies at national level, district level, local level, at state level, making some of these policy interventions which are called for, and role of the government, as I said, has to be redefined so that it becomes more facilitator, more push from the government to help people to succeed. I was talking because Atmanirbhar Bharat is such a popular topic. Yesterday I was talking to some industry association and I gave them an example. I said, look at a child. Every parent wishes that he should be Atmanirbhar, isn't it? That's why you make your child grow to best of the school and give him best of the education. But can you tell a child that you are so good and I want you to be Atmanirbhar, so don't go out of house at all. Stay in the house itself. The best parent will say, no, go and face competition. Go out, live in the real world, and then become Atmanirbhar. So this is what we should try to do. Make sure that our industry succeeds, but make them very competitive. Make small scale businesses, allow them a possibility of becoming large businesses, as always happens. What was the size of Google when it was formed? And what is the size of Google today? If there was a restrictive practice in the US that will not allow Google to become as big as this, now incidentally they are facing this problem. Like the Europeans particularly are saying that these giant companies must be broken. In even US Congress, there's a talk going on. Some of the senators and congressmen are saying that these large giants, technology giants must be broken into different pieces. It's a different issue. But allowing small business to grow also is a part of a public policy and should be pursued very aggressively. So I think many elements to it. I can go on and on, but I know there are many important speakers to speak. I just heard my dear friend Ritu speaking with a very distinguished guest.
I think, yeah.
Yeah,
so it's so nice to hear again. It's like what you create a picture in front of us, and we keep want to look at that continuously without acknowledging anything else. So it's so beautiful and so wonderful to hear. I must acknowledge that, sir. I can't miss, or I can't actually forget Alfonso being a husband to a Maharashtrian lady. My father being coming from coastal kind of Maharashtra, and I know Ratnagiri, where you have been elected for 4 times, is such an amazing story. And 2 important points what you brought up during this discussion was supply chain, the importance of supply chain, and Atmanirbharta, not for India as a country, but each district, each city, and the benefit of that should reach out to the common man, at least before the statistics should reach. I think it's a very important. Another part was the global market. Yesterday we heard Guru Murthy ji where he was talking about global market and democracy, how they are go hand in hand, how beneficial they are. So this whole thought process brings to another context to our mind. What are these global challenges what we as an Indian will face when we talk about Atmanirbharta?
See, firstly, as I said, to convert concept into policy is itself is a important task. But thanks to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has a unique ability to convert concepts into policy into reality. So that's a good part of one of the challenge that we can overcome is thanks to his leadership. So that's a good part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat. But there are a lot of headwinds in the world today. For example, the other countries may not be as willing for you to benefit at their expense as it happened in the past. Like today, there is already a slogan called "Make America Great Again," which is the slogan on which Trump is riding, and he hopes he will ride it to White House again, which opinion polls don't suggest right now, but that is his desire. But so there are a lot of headwinds of this kind, which will actually, and there's a lot of protectionism growing in the world, which will actually making us part of the integrated global value chain and supply chain will be one of the challenges that we'll be facing. And therefore, to overcome that, we must make sure that multilateral trading platforms get more strengthened and more active. That's what I tried when I was a commerce industry minister. I had 2 mini ministerials in India, one attended by as many as 57 countries in 16th of March 2018. And then subsequently, just before the election in 2019, I chaired another one. The idea was that we must open up and we must make sure that the global economy also provides opportunity for a developing country like India, and of course not India alone, but other African and other developing countries also to benefit from global trading platform, because we are not yet seen the fruits of that globalization to benefit our people. So we must get bent. So that is another way we should try to work on that. So one challenging part. The third challenging part would be that which Prime Minister had taken a very important step of creating one seamless market for agriculture. So this is a very good thing. That's the market access issue they're talking about. Even if you prepare an internal trading platforms for the whole country, that itself is a big market. So I think that market access issue will come from there. But in that, even the role of our bureaucracy will be very important, because when I am saying that you must help business to grow, who is the one who may have certain mindset? So changing the mindset of regulators, very important. In fact, I'll tell you another thing why I'm saying regulators. I used to bring startup community on one side of the table, another side I used to bring the regulators. Because I used to tell regulators that, for example, in fintech, you have developed a new product. The regulator in financial services is going to say, no, my regulation is made in 1960, which is very valid. Or you are doing something, a regulator in healthcare sector. A person has developed a new healthcare dispensing mechanism. But you will say, no, my regulation was made in 1970, I don't want to change it. So break from the past is very necessary for Atmanirbharta, because if we have to think about new ideas, new concepts, new products, innovations, and if the regulation is going to be based on your old concept and old ideas, it never will happen. It is like you are trying to regulate a child's lifestyle when he was 4 years old, and today is 40 years, but you are saying, no, I will regulate you on the same basis. That at 4 years, my parents will tell me, you have to come home by 4 o'clock, so you must come by 4 o'clock home. They say, well, I will not be able to earn even 1 rupee, because at my office they will not allow me to come at 4 o'clock, because I am now 40, I'm earning and I'm working. So that is a disconnect between regulation and the today's necessities. So that again will have to be properly taken into account. Then capital will be very critical. We'll need capital. India's savings rate has gone down considerably. We'll have to build it up and make sure that money is available at a good cost. Today, globally, the money is available at 0%, thanks to the packages that are given. So our people will suffer from that if they don't get money at the right price. So the interest cost will have to be reduced. And I used to say, when I was a power minister, under Atal Bihari Vajpayee's cabinet, when I introduced the path-breaking reforms, Electricity Act, etc., I used to tell them that दो चीज है, ब्याज और बीज, बिजली और ब्याज, ये दोनों की वजह से इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट या बिजनेस करने वाला फंसा हुआ है. ब्याज ज्यादा है और बिजली के दर बहुत ऊपर है. तो मुझे लगता है आज भी वो सही मायने में है कि इनपुट कॉस्ट, whether it is capital, whether it is power or labor or all others, let it be competitive if you want to be facing the global challenge.
I think very true, sir. आपने जो बताया, what you said just now is changing with the time, changing with the requirements, changing with the technology is the most important thing, which will actually help us to become Atmanirbhar. I know, sir, you are busy and you have another engagement to attend. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your wisdom with us. Thanks for your valuable time. And as a founder, chancellor, what you have told us, it's something apart which we need to follow and prepare new graduates who will help and contribute to make India Atmanirbhar. Thank you so much for joining, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable time.
And just one last comment,
please, sir.
Because you reminded me of my new role as a chancellor of the university. I would feel that I'm very proud of the fact that such a great university, which is thinking, making break from the past, but also linking with the past. So this is very important. So past is your biggest enemy, but past also gives you guidance. So you have to choose the right thing from the past, not the wrong things from the past. So this university dwells on our very great culture, heritage. At the same time, is not carrying the baggage of wrong impressions, wrong experiences of the past. So I think we'll create graduates who will be with new vision, but will be rooted and grounded into the old ethos and cultures of India.
Thank you so much, sir. We shall follow your path, which you have shown.
Thank you.
Over to you, Sahilji.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sureshji. It was an honor listening to you. And thank you, Nideshji, for moderating this session.